We're at 409 South Main Street, house recently purchased by Ann and Joseph Studholm. Next to this house is Ettra Road, which goes to what used to be called Milford, and also the community of Ettra. It was also known as a turnpike because for many years the roads like Ettra Road was actually a toll road. So there was a toll booth not far from here where people would have to pay a toll to be able to get to what was Milford and Parianville. Prior to the building of this house, there was another house that was referred to as a mansion, so it was quite large, but nowhere near the size of this house. We're not 100% sure whether that house was moved somewhere or raised, but my assumption was that it was raised because we would probably know if it was located somewhere close. The house that had been moved was built by a Reverend Asher, and he was a minister in town in the 1840s, and sadly he had 3 children that all drowned in the ponds, which are now what we know as Meadow Lakes, all 3 falling through the ice at two different occasions. Mr. Asher Moore moved from this house in the 1850s, 1851, after his children had died. This property was part of a 64-acre orchard, apple orchards and peach orchards. 200 yards from here, there's now a street that's called Orchard Avenue, and that's the reason it's called Orchard Avenue, is because of the orchards that were there. After Asher Moore left Hightstown, the 64 acres was purchased by John C. Ward. John C. Ward is pretty well known for those that have been around here for a while, because you drive on Ward Street, both East Ward and West Ward. And John C. Ward also owned what we currently know as Petty School, almost in its entirety. As a matter of fact, there is still a Ward burial ground in the northern part of the Petty campus, right next to the Art Center. Mr. Ward also gave the land that the elementary school on Mercer Street, and gave a large amount of the land that Petty's on. He sold some of it first, but then sold it to them afterwards. Ward had first sold the property to Van Nest, Abraham Van Nest, before John and Mary Pommier had purchased it, built in 1881. But John and Mary Pommier had purchased the estate and the house that I had mentioned before that was raised. This house, the contractor who built it was a fellow named George Pearson, and Mr. Pommier owned a building supply business, we'd call it today, a lumber yard and supply house in Hightstown that was very, very successful. So this house that we're looking at now was built in 1881, and as we can see, it is a multi-styled house. Some would drive around, see houses like this, say it's a Victorian style, etc. That's not correct. Actually, it has multiple styles. It's a Second Empire style, which came by the name of when Napoleon III in the 1852 to 1870. Also, at the top, the 3rd floor is a mansard roof, but with the dormer windows in it, it's known as an Eastlake style. And Eastlake, you would think would be named after a lake somewhere, but it's not. It's named after an architect whose name is Charles Locke Eastlake. On the interior, there's also multiple styles. A Second Empire, which we've seen on the exterior, but also Italian finishes on the inside. The banisters, the balusters, etc. So it's a very unique house. I posit that Pommier did this as sort of a showroom for his lumber business because of selling houses and siding and things like that. Rather than sticking to one style, he could bring customers and show them all the different styles. That's my theory. So it was just kept in the estate for a few years before the Wilsons bought it in 1918. They resided here for a number of years until they sold it to Petty after his death in 1941. During that period of time, Petty owned a lot of houses that were not in the quadrant of the main campus. The houses tended to continue to be called by the name of the owner that had sold it to Petty. In this case, this was always known as Wilson House. In 1972, it started to be very difficult for boarding schools to be able to safely maintain frame houses such as this. This was first a faculty house, but then shortly thereafter, they changed the second floor and the third floor to a boys' dorm specifically for senior boys at Petty. Main housemaster for that period of time was the athletic director named William Thompson. Probably a good thing because he could control senior boys better than probably an English teacher could. He had three sons, and so it fit in as well. Up on the mansard roof, between the second and third floor, is a box gutter, and I happened to live across the street, I still do when I was being brought up, and I would watch the senior boys run quickly or walk quickly around that box gutter, and they would do time trials and time each other to see who could go the fastest. I never remember anybody falling, but it was a little scary for me watching it. When Petty did sell the house in 1972 because they could not keep up these type of properties as dorms anymore due to fire escapes, fire alarms, those types of concerns, they offered these off-campus houses to their faculty members first. And one of them's name was John Edgar. What he did is he split it into two apartments. The first floor, and then the second and third floor was a apartment. I was not his first tenant, but his second tenant. So my wife and I actually rented here from 1973 to 1975 on the first floor from Mr. Edgar. Mr. Edgar then sold it to a Martin and Ann Waldron. Martin Waldron was actually the editor of the New Jersey section of the Sunday New York Times, and his wife Ann wrote children's books, Ann Waldron. And interesting enough is that this, when it was actually built first, was not in the borough of Hightstown. We know today the borough of Hightstown goes all the way out to Petty Golf Course, but the borough line actually stopped right here at your road. So that's the story of the house. The town is very happy that the Studholm's here. They've fallen in love with it. Ann's father lives in Meadow Lakes, right up the road, and so they passed here many times from their previous home in Princeton to visit her dad, and as she said, she couldn't get this house out of her mind. So now it may be driving her out of her mind. However, we're very happy that the Studholms are here.
Okay, so I'm Ann Studholm. My husband Joe and I closed on this house in, I think it was August 2019. And we had been driving from Princeton to Meadow Lakes to see my father, who's at Meadow Lakes. And we were coming over here a lot, like every day. And we would drive, the turn on Etcher Road was always marked by this big spooky old house. But we thought more and more about maybe moving to Hightstown. I realized that this house was for sale. It had a modest little for sale sign on it. And without telling Joe, I got our broker, David Schur, to come over with me and take a peek. And it was a sad looking house, but Fannie Mae owned it. It had been in foreclosure. We didn't have a huge budget. And so for our own sake, but also to be fair to the house, we wanted to make sure that we could make it livable and bring back some of its sort of single family houseness, but it had been through the wars and had such a history of being essentially slimmed down and I'll say sort of simplified. So we negotiated with Fannie Mae, we negotiated a price that could include the work that we knew needed to be done, which was in particular all new wiring and new heating system. So we had a budget, and the very first day of work, there was a live gas line. One of the subcontractors hit the gas line and the house caught fire. And the Hightstown firemen did a phenomenal job. They got the fire out, but it had still done considerable damage to the interior, though luckily not to most of the structure. The fire had risen up into the third floor and was licking at the inside of the roof, but the firemen got it out, so it didn't hurt the roof. So it was a lot of cosmetic damage, a certain amount of interior structural damage, but not much heavy-duty structural damage, but now we had to deal with that. But now we had to still do the renovations we've been planning on, plus do the damage. And we've started the video in this kitchen because the next thing, of course, that happened was COVID hit. That's why this is a virtual tour. That's why I'm wearing a mask. And so that also had an effect on what we could do. We're starting in the kitchen. This is the back wing of the house. It shows as a two-story wing with a lopsided fenestration on the 1895 balloon lithograph of the town. So we know it's here. It's probably original. There are the remains of a well underneath this kitchen. So I'm certain that this was the kitchen, probably right from when the house was built in around 1865. And after the fire started in the basement, kind of right behind where the stove is here, but down in the basement. It became apparent that the floor structure in the kitchen they hadn't done a great job on it, and it had been weakened. So this entire room had to be stripped down to gut rehab. This floor was gone. You could actually look in the windows right down to the cellar. This floor is completely new beams. The windows, those have what I think is a mid-20th century, very plain window trim around them. Those were able to save. The window over where we put the sink in, and that had to be redone a little bit to move the sink over there. But for the most part, where the door is and the existing windows are, at least as it was when we bought it. Who knows if it was like that when it was built. One of the things that happened with COVID was we had ordered cabinets from IKEA. We'd had IKEA cabinets before. They'd worked out fine, and they weren't able to supply them. So Revival's workers actually designed and built this kitchen completely from scratch, this little sort of kitchenette area. For the most part, we left it open, and we left it, we just bought rack and put the stuff on rack, and I actually like it much better than a kitchen with a lot of cabinets in it. I think it's more open, it's easier to use. Just normal people kitchens are going to the sort of the rack look of a commercial kitchen, and I like it, and it functions very well, and it's a little bit more like what this kitchen would have been originally. Victorian kitchens had basically a big central work table, and this is again, the guys built this, a big central work table, and then you would have kitchen cupboards maybe lining the walls. The kitchen really was one of the areas that had to be completely redone, and yet still, in very difficult times on a limited budget, we didn't put in sort of the big fancy kitchen. We did a kitchen that really works for us and what I think is more true to the original spirit, and also all of the lives of the house over time, including the lovely Fannie Mae appliances. So this is the only bathroom that was remotely original. We are in the back wing above the kitchen here. And like I say, from the 1895 lithograph, it was a two-story wing. What they used this room for, who knows? The bathroom tiles, this is 1920s, and we did what we could to preserve the look of the bathroom. It has beautiful avocado green cast iron tub and the sink to go with the maroon and black and tan color scheme. So we kept that. It hadn't been too badly damaged by the fire, but it had been damaged by that earlier flood because the pipe burst in what had been the shower. This wall here went all the way up to the ceiling, but it bisected the window. You still could see the window. It was very weird. It had a shower in the tub because the original shower had been, I think, damaged a long time ago. Then it had had its leak. It had been turned into a closet. There was basically plastic wallboard all over this room. And when we started looking into it, all of a sudden, there's a shower. My husband said, can we restore it to being a shower? And it actually had the shower floor matched the tile floor. And Revival said, yes, you can, but the shower pan is going to have to be rebuilt. It's not watertight. They said, but we can save a lot of the tile and match it in places because there were 2 toilet holes. Because when it was a dorm, we think, there were 2 toilets. So that had to get patched up anyway. And so they started in, and then they realized that whatever this tile on the floors embedded is like Portland cement. We are immediately upstairs from the reconstructed utility closet. And again, this is the portion of the house that was damaged the most by the fire. The house has a very simple 4-square layout. 4 main rooms plus the wing downstairs, 4 main rooms plus the wing on the 2nd floor, 4 rooms in the 3rd floor mansard roof, essentially attic space. They were unfinished probably until the 20th century. It was just an attic. So this room had originally had back-to-back facing fireplaces. Those were long gone. They had been turned into closets. So basically this room was 2 rooms with closets in the middle. The fire damaged a lot of that, and my husband said, let's just leave it one big room. And it is going to be a combination of kids' TV room, his office. It's got, all the boxes you're seeing are full of books. We've got some of the books unpacked. And basically, if anybody wants to play board games or anything like that, and everybody hangs out. So it's a mess like everything else in the house, but it's a wonderful room. Revival did a very good job matching the floor so it's not super obvious where the damage had occurred. They used some floor from the house from other parts where the fire had damaged some. They also went and sourced old wood. The window trim is different because they were 2 rooms. One of them, the trim got redone when they were putting up the more simple trim. The other one still has what is probably original window trim, so you can see that. So again, it's sort of cool. There are these subtle little signs that it really was 2 different rooms and has a certain amount of history. And again, I hope that anyone who lived here will say, oh yeah, that was my room. This is on the 2nd floor, so it would have been the 2nd floor apartment if anyone was here at that time.